The Code 3. A live podcast sponsored by the Marin Fire History Group. All about the history of the fire service in Marin County, California. And now your host, retired Fire Chief Paul Smith.
Well, good day, and welcome to Marin Fire History. This is retired Fire Chief Paul Smith, and I'm here today with our co-host, Bill Lellis, and our guest, Fire Chief Bill Tyler from Novato Fire District. Well, good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to Marin Fire History.
Good morning.
Morning.
Bill, why don't you go ahead and start and talk to Chief Tyler a little bit about his career today.
Okay, I'll do that. Good morning, Chief. We want to thank you for taking the time to participate in this program. We're going to make you famous today, we think. So, Bill, how long have you been in? I'm going to call you Bill if it's okay.
No, yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right. How long have you been in the fire service?
Well, first I just want to say, Bill, how honored I am that you guys have asked me to come and talk with you today. Bill, I admired so much your career and everything that you've done. And I remember driving with you, it was out to Bolinas or somewhere to take some command class that you were teaching. And we talked the whole way out. I don't know if you remember that or not, but you began to share with me, what it was like being a fire chief. And I always remember that and took that to heart. And seeing you still engaged at the level that you are is just an inspiration to a lot of people. So great to see you again.
Okay, and the check is in the mail, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, so you asked how long I've been in the fire service. So it's really been, over 30 years. And I would say, marking the fire service, I think of when I started in 1994 down in Tam Valley. And that was right at a time when Mill Valley and Tam Valley were splitting up. They had basically consolidated and then went through a deconsolidation. And it was a very interesting time, I think, at Tam Valley. And I remember the energy, the positive energy around that reformation and as the original members and as whether they were, BC captain, what have you, kind of reformed in that there was a lot of positive energy at Tam Valley. And we sort of thought of it as a dream team. And I think I was really in the right place at the right time to be able to move into that organization and completely unaware of the politics at that time as a young man, completely unaware of, how things worked and just excited to be on an engine, riding backwards, going to calls and some phenomenal cast of characters that were there. My captain, Jim Irving, and just how much I learned and kind of cut my teeth into it. Before that, I was working as a EMT and then a paramedic in San Francisco for one of the private companies and trying to get experience. But that opportunity to move and transition to the fire service, which is what I always wanted to do, I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah. Tell us about you. You're born and raised where, Bill?
So I was born in Oakland, California, and raised out in Livermore. It was back when the Tri-Valley area was really booming, that Livermore, Pleasanton, Dublin area. So many families, so many kids. It was just really a golden era in my mind of growing up. My dad was an electrical engineer for the Lawrence National Laboratory out there in Livermore. My mom was a nurse and just had a block full of kids and, took off super independent, didn't come home till the street lights came on. Your parents never knew where you were, and grew up really in an ideal, what I feel like was an ideal place for a kid.
You have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have a brother, younger brother. He's about 3.5, 4 years younger than me. Ended up being a police officer and worked for Bay Area Rapid Transit for the BART system.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool. And you're married? Been married how long?
Yeah, I'm married to my wife, Marie, happily married over 26 years now. Um, and really, she has been there for my entire fire career. I met her when I was at Tam Valley as a sleeper there, and um, grew a family, and really, just became a part of the community here in Marin.
Well, yeah, when we look back on our careers, we sometimes have a tendency to forget how important our wives were to us because they raised the kids. We were gone a third of the time
That's right.
away from the home. So the mothers took over running. You have how many children?
I have four children. I have a daughter and three sons. Three of them are out of the house now. They've all gone to college and are starting their careers. So basically, off the payroll, I have one still that's a senior in high school, and he is looking forward to going to college, and he's interested in construction management.
Hey, before I turn it over to Paul, how did you become a paramedic, or why did you become a paramedic that led into the fire service?
Yeah, I mean, it started as just becoming an EMT, and I think that two things really propelled that decision. One was that my mom was a nurse, and she had two sisters. One of her other sisters was a nurse, and I remember, as a kid, them sitting around talking about their stories in the emergency room and being nurses and patients and illnesses and all those things. And in fact, my mom used to take me when she'd teach CPR. I was the sitting between two dummies in the back seat. We didn't wear seatbelts back then, and she would use me as the child demonstration for choking. And I remember sitting watching her teach people. And I think there was just a natural interest in medicine and patients and helping people that came directly from her. And then the other was an experience that I had after college. I was working in a soccer shop. I was an athlete interested in soccer, and a group of young men came in that were very healthy, drove nice looking cars, and were off during the day. And I remember saying, "What do you guys do for a living?" They said, "Oh, we're firefighters, and we're training for the firefighter Olympics." And I said, "I can't believe there's a job that you can, work out and train and be fit like that." And so I went and practiced with them because I was a college athlete playing soccer and had the best time. And I said, I gotta do this. And so it was kind of a combination of meeting these people that were super encouraging to me, helped point me in the right direction, kind of nurtured me into that, and then just a desire to serve, a desire for the team aspect of working together. Those really appealed to me. And then the medicine that I talked about. The other thing too that was pivotal was, I went up to Mount Shasta, Shasta County, to their fire program because all of the fire academies were so impacted in the Bay Area, you couldn't get in. I mean, I was taking tests, with thousands of people to try and get into the fire service at that time. So I had to go all the way up to Shasta, to junior college. And I remember part of their program was you had to do some internships at local fire departments. So I was up at Lake Shasta, Central Valley Fire. It was a small, that one man per shift. The rest were volunteers. And I came in and started running calls with them. Basically, it was a one man, driver, and then I sat in the captain's seat just as a student, and just how frightening and exhilarating that was at the same time. But we went on calls, and as an EMT, we would be waiting for the medics to arrive and feeling like, gosh, I just want to do more for this person. There's only the only basic life support that we could do. And when the medics showed up, we were like, man, they're here. They're helping these people. They could do this definitive care. And I thought, I want to do that. I don't want to just wait, and just I want to be able to do more. So those were the reasons I think that propelled me towards becoming a paramedic.
Okay, that's wonderful. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Paul right now and talk about how you became a sleeper, how you heard about it, and see to where you are this morning. Paul, take it away.
Good morning, Bill, and thank you.
Yeah, good morning.
You mentioned earlier when you were chatting with Bill about your time at Tam Valley. So were you, how did you get over to Marin from Contra Costa County or Alameda County?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've always loved Marin and Mill Valley. My family was from Tennessee Valley Road originally. There's Portuguese background in the dairies, and so my grandmother was born in Tennessee Valley on that farm, and so it was a beautiful place I love to return to. But really, I was in paramedic school. I was living in Hayward and commuting. We were in the intensive program at Stanford Hospital, and so I was going every day. And I met J.D. Moore, who we went to paramedic school together. And J.D. lived in Mill Valley. And so, when you're young like that, you can move quickly. So I ended up, JD and I became roommates over there, and he was trying to get on as a volunteer in Mill Valley. I had sort of gone through a student program in Hayward for Alameda County Fire. So I was already starting to, try and get myself positioned to be able to take a test. And I was taking a lot of tests at that time, went up to Seattle, Colorado, down to LA. There was a circuit that we were doing that you'd run into these guys, Oakland, San Francisco, trying to get in on a department. And so when I met JD and he said, hey, come check this out. So right at that time, I mentioned, Mill Valley and Tam Valley were sort of, splitting apart. And so we would go to the Mill Valley volunteer drills every week, and they weren't taking new volunteers because they were going through this split that we didn't understand or know about. We just showed up every week and stood there and watched them all train, trying to show them that we wanted a job. We, even whatever that was. Sure. And this is just by chance and being at the right place at the right time. But I came down one night to a training, and I knew I wasn't going to get to train, but this was maybe, our 5th week in a row that we'd gone down. And I went into the kitchen in Mill Valley, and I heard this big commotion going on in the chief's office between chiefs, and I was just kind of hanging out. And then one of the chiefs came out and walked into the kitchen and looked at me, and he said, do you want a job? And I said, yeah. And he said, hey, follow me. So I got in my car and he jumped in his, and we drove over to Tam Valley Station 4, and I filled out an application for a sleeper. And basically what happened is I got hired on the spot as a sleeper, and they were looking for 3, and I was one of the first ones, just by chance. And that really changed my life. Completely changed my life.
Yeah, just being in the right place at the right time.
Right place, right time. And
that's a phenomenal story. And your first job, paid job, was in Novato then, huh? After TAM?
Yeah, that's right. So, I was at TAM probably about a year or so, working closely with them and taking tests, and an opportunity surfaced in Novato. I drove up to Novato, drove around, went to the fire stations, met with some of the medics, and just prepared myself. And so a few of us from Mill Valley took that test. Mike Duckhorn, J.D. Moore, and some others. And back then it was a real physical, test you had to do. And I had been taking a lot of tests at that time, so I finally felt like I was positioning myself to do well on those things. But it was just paramedics that they were hiring.
Right.
So instead of testing with thousands of people, it was really just testing with about 50 or 60 people. And so the odds were much improved by that time.
Yeah. No, good. Well, good for you. And where did you start in Novato? How many stations were open when you started, Bill?
There were 4 stations, and there's 5 now, but there were 4 stations in Novato, and they had 2 paramedic on each ambulance transport, and occasionally they would have medics on engines. But we did have, BLS engines, some ALS, BLS engines. And it was interesting because at that time, there was more and more paramedics that were trying to expand, in that area. That was their minimum qualifications, is you had to be firefighter 1 certified, and then also have been a paramedic. So, I would say there were maybe a couple of captains that had been paramedics from the late 80s. And there was still a little bit of tension in that position between some of the other positions. We weren't yet fully integrated and accepted. It was kind of like you deal with the patients, you deal with the transports. But over time, now our organization is completely, full. Everyone that works here had been a paramedic in their career.
Yeah, isn't that something? Isn't that something? Because I recall back in the days when, Novato had their paramedic on the squad, and
Right.
the EMT, the EMTs on the Novato ambulance would transport the patient. So it's come a long ways, and really, why don't we talk a little bit about what I would consider maybe your milestones as you became the fire marshal in Novato, correct?
Yeah, so I sort of took the road less traveled, I would say. When I was hired with 5 people and we had an academy of our own. And I got exposed to a lot of great leaders at that time. On my acceptance letter, it had Jim Berthenier's name, but by the time I got hired in January of 96, it was John Rentz.
All right.
And John shared with me in a personal way, how important it is in terms of career development to prepare yourself early, for increasing levels of responsibility. And we had a career development guide at that time. I remember Chief Meston was our training officer, and they talked about that, and I took that seriously. I completed college already. I was very interested in continuing to learn and to try and figure out the system. And so I took every opportunity to train and take classes, and that's how I met Bill early. Bill Lellis was doing that. At that time, the organization allowed, if they had funding, you could take 1 or 2 classes a year. And for me, I wanted to accelerate that. And so, I would take my vacations and go down to the Asilomar with my wife, my young wife, and my, daughter. And as the kids began to join the family, and every vacation I was taking classes and courses.
Okay.
So it's down into Silomar, and they would go to the aquarium and have fun, and I would go to class, and then I joined them in the evening, for dinner. And that's how we did it. And I was able to really rapidly put together the coursework for fire officer, and even chief officer. I just took those classes as fast as I could, and then tried to take responsibilities working in committees and other experiences, and just try and advance that way. It was just because I was always interested in that. Honestly, sometimes, it would be quiet at some of the stations, and you could get a little bored, actually. Where our call volume has increased dramatically since I started, but there would be days when we might not turn a wheel. And so I tried to, find projects and things to do, courses, committees, just to stay busy. And there was an opportunity when Tom Elliott left. Tom Elliott was the fire marshal. For the first time, they went outside for fire marshal, and they ended up selecting Forrest Craig from San Rafael. And there was an opportunity to become a fire inspector. And Chief Rentz had been a fire inspector, and I went and talked to him about it. And he said, go get these experiences. You can always come back to the floor, just experience everything you can. And so I took that to heart. I transferred up into the bureau and went to a 9 to 5 schedule, 8 to 5. And I lived in town, so it was easy to do, and just learned a tremendous amount by doing that. The concept of prevention, trying to we got really good. I always say we got really good at saving people. If you think about, people in a river floating by, and we got good at pulling them out and rescuing them, but shouldn't somebody go up the river and figure out what keeps throwing them in? And so that was kind of the mindset that I adopted and tried to learn everything I could. Again, Bill Lellis was there teaching coursework, and the nuts and bolts behind all these things were so interesting to me. And about the time I thought I would go back to the floor, the deputy fire marshal's position opened, and Steve Mecho retired. And so that's where I got interested also in fire investigation, hazardous materials, all of those experiences. I was on the hazmat team and the investigation team, became a specialist in hazmat, and then got court qualified as a fire investigator in cause and origin. And, again, just expanding parts of the fire service that are less traveled.
Right.
It's so important. Put you in contact with the community, as an ambassador, and picked up some additional skills that I think served me well. Community engagement, how to deal with difficult people and situations, challenging, people don't like to see you when you show up as a fire inspector. They love to see you when you show up on that bad day when they need a medic or a firefighter. And there was an adjustment around that. But if you do your job well, serve the public, they will appreciate that too.
And moving forward through your career in the Bureau, when you became the fire chief, we didn't have Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. We didn't have the type of WUI work that we're doing today. And I've got to hand it to the fire chiefs in Marin and the fire prevention folks, because they've come leaps and bounds in what you're talking about on the prevention side and on the preparedness side compared to where we were when you joined the Bureau. Wouldn't you say it was fair?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting timeline I think that you can follow, and it's really about standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
Because the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority didn't just appear. I mean, there were decades of foundational work that occurred from other fire chiefs, whether it was, recognizing the increase in vegetation fires and the danger that posed, going to type 3 engines when we didn't have those, setting our crews up to be able to go out of county on these campaign fires. That all occurred, while I was early in the organization. The Vision fire happened, right when I was getting hired. That was in '95. And so the organization had to respond both operationally, making sure every firefighter had a radio, making sure that they had all the protective equipment that they needed, the increase in training and focus. As an organization back then, we had to decide, what kind of organization are we? Are we a structure firefighting organization? Are we a wildland fire organization? Are we an EMS organization that fights fires every once in a while? What are we? And we had to evolve, but there were so many responsibilities, and you have to perform at a high level.
Right.
And so that's where all of the training and education, great equipment, facilities really come into play to support firefighters being able to do that. But with regards to what was happening, the pivotal moment for Novato Fire, and I think a lot of Marin County was back when Steve Rucker died at the Cedar Fire back in 2003. And that really got a lot of people's attention. We had to wrestle with that as an organization and try and protect our firefighters. And I, my hat's off to Chief Meston and also Chief Dan Northern to try and better prepare our organization for what we were now confronted with. And that really was the start of the increase in vegetation and wildfires up and down California, mainly a Southern California phenomenon, but then, really came back hard in Northern California beginning in 2017 with the Tubbs fire.
Right.
And Chief Mark Heine was the fire chief during that time. And just a tremendous wake-up call for communities as a result. And I think that I was uniquely positioned as the fire marshal at that time in 2017 to recognize, what really needed to be done in terms of an increase in our our code adoption process. Marin County back in 2005. So again, this is following the Cedar Fire. We're the first agencies to adopt a wildland urban interface map and a wildland urban interface code that began to recognize that there are these transitional areas from vegetation into the built environment that were at risk, and that we needed to over time begin to implement both hardening and vegetation management requirements to help build in resilience. And you begin to use terms like fire adaptive communities, and that that really became an awakening. And the Tubbs fire created the opportunity for all of the fire chiefs to get together and say, we really need to be doing a lot more around this. And that's where that was born. So we all as agencies, though, were working independently. Everybody was competing for resources. We were, challenged and competing for grant funds to get things done. If we could just get one vegetation project done, we felt like we were doing our jobs. But that was so far from what is needed the 2018, the Camp Fire, on top of that, the Tubbs fire just propelled the community into action in ways that weren't there before. And so, but I really think that had we not done the work after the 2003 fire with the code adoption process, with requiring more of our communities, we were positioned well. We already had a community wildfire protection plan in place that the county had established. The work that Scott Alber did as the fire marshal there, Forrest Craig, really allowed us to move quickly in the MWPA realm with that as a foundation, I think.
I agree. I agree. You hit some very key points, and you by Novato Fire and the Marin Fire community, I hate to say it, but took advantage of those disasters, as fire prevention also always seems to do with a tragic incident, and improved for the future.
Yeah, I mean, challenges always have opportunities. And so we tried to make the most of that. And I just, my hat's off to the other fire chiefs in Marin County. We're a close bunch. And that is really, based on the work that Bill had done and Paul, you had done in forming, monthly meetings of the fire chiefs, working collaboratively, shared resource agreements, but just always sharing, prepared us for being able to do automatic aid agreements, boundary drops, the things that you worked for, the challenges that you faced, positioned us well to do that. And the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, started on the back of a napkin at a fire chief's breakfast, at Marvin's in Novato, where Jason drew on a map kind of the Mount Tam, what that looked like. And we started talking about how we could work together. At the same time, we had pressure from the grand jury, the Marin County grand jury, asking us to do more, to do better, how to work together and collaboratively, and recognize that the funding was not there. We needed to create a new organization that could work together and provide funding to get it done.
Right.
So, what that looked like was the creation and formation of a Joint Powers Authority, which was the MWPA, which required us to really get tight on what it was we thought we could do to move the needle. Behind the scenes, the fire chiefs were meeting with the Marin County City Managers Group and some attorneys, and we had to convince the city managers that the amount of money that we were asking for could make a difference. And so we were able to, through a series of meetings down at county headquarters there, to basically get the city managers on board to form this JPA.
Right.
Then we had to take this draft of a JPA around to, see if I stay sitting too much, the light goes out. There we go. And we had to take that around, to all the elected officials and get them on board. And so we had a series of meetings across all 17 cities and towns where it required at least 2 presentations per, and began to get folks on board with this. And, you know, as you know, not everybody wants to have a WUI area or adopted a map and have a WUI ordinance. Some people prefer to stay low under the radar, because the more attention you draw to these types of hazards, the concern about how it might affect, you know, individuals in terms of the cost that they have to expend,
Right.
and also the insurance issues that are really surfacing now as a result of all the losses that are occurring. It's a big deal.
It's significant. It was significant. Yes, it was.
So there was a handful of the fire chiefs that went around to every single meeting to try to convince the elected officials, along with support from the city managers. We had good documents, we had good rationale, and we had to build a coalition with people that we weren't normally used to working with. For example, the environmental community, you know, they usually push back on doing vegetation management. You know, there's a strong, you know, there's this urban growth boundary that they want to preserve their open space areas, as if they are wildlands, you know, as if it's Yosemite. And we had to say, look, you know, you've got to allow us to do work in some of these areas that abut people's properties. And so we were able to work with that group and convince them that we were not the enemy trying to take out all their trees and all their brush and all of that, but that there was a way to do it responsibly, to basically return as much as we could the natural environment to a more healthy state.
Yep.
You know, you know the arguments and have heard talk about, we have a fire dependent landscape. That means these oak woodlands require fire on a certain return interval to keep them healthy. And because we got so good at putting out the fires, and because people, you know, came in and built into these areas and added ornamental vegetation, that before you know it, we had just jackpot fuels. All of the oak death that was happening also just created this environment where that one spark that they had up in the Tubbs fire and up at the campfire could end the same way here in Marin County. And we're just seeing it extend down into LA with the fires down there, the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of those things kind of came together with a big push, and we were able to successfully form the JPA. And then we needed the funding, rather than it be a sales tax. We thought it was better to go with a parcel tax. There was more ability for funding there, and the community responded overwhelmingly. And to get parcel taxes, as you know, that's a high bar. That's at 2/3 support, and we were able to do that. Thankfully, bringing in, you know, $200 million over 10 years. We've got a sunset clause. You know, we worked with the taxpayer groups, the sustainable taxpayers, and that was another partner that we weren't expecting, but by collaborating, listening, finding the right place, we were able to get enough support to pull this off. And so it's really up to the fire departments, districts now to deliver on those promises of what we can do. We're midway through, we're 5 years into this, and we have to demonstrate that we're going to do such a good job, you know, with the public's funds, that they will put the trust in us to renew that, you know, just 5 short years from now. And so I'm confident that we're demonstrating that. You know, the fires down in Southern California look so overwhelming. You know, we are an existing built environment that's of combustible construction and ornamental vegetation that's going to take additional understanding, education, hearts and minds to get the communities in Marin County to want to make that change. And so, again, going back to sort of my prevention background, I think I was uniquely positioned to kind of help, you know, spearhead some of those efforts, and people are responding. So there's still a ways to go. And even within our own firefighters, you know, educating them on the importance of this, because in some cases they feel like, hey, what about us? We're spending a lot of money on prevention and education. What about the firefighters and their role, which is critical, but we don't have enough firefighters and we don't have enough fire engines to stop the kind of fires that are affecting, you know, California right now. And it's the prevention, mitigation, it's the partnerships, it's the people, it's the homeowners, it's the business owners that have to do the adapting to fire, because it's not going away.
No. And that was a really good synopsis you gave us, Bill, of fire prevention, all how it's changed since, you became a fire inspector all the way to your fire chief responsibilities and your integration with the other agencies in Marin. So, good job. I got my hats off to you and the other fire chiefs and for getting it across the finish line. But let me ask you,
we couldn't have done it without you guys. I mean, that's the point.
Well, when I look back and, my hat's off to Bill Ellis's era because, we stood on their shoulders as we pushed forward through, my career. So, yeah, and as an aside, I've got to tell you, I agree with you. The Marin County Fire Chiefs Association, who happens to sponsor Marin Fire History, they're a stand-up group. I've always enjoyed working with them, and very collaborative. And I hope it keeps, yeah, absolutely. So, Bill, let me ask you, what are your plans? What are your plans for the future after you retire as the fire chief here in a matter of days and weeks now?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a transition that's occurring right now. I'm happy to be able to pass the torch off to Dan Peters. He was just selected yesterday by the board of directors. We made that announcement, and he is an internal candidate. But for me, there are I think it's a third act, if you will. The hope is from firefighters, it's 30 years in and 30 years out, right? What are we going to do with it? And so, I intend to stay very engaged here locally. I'm going to be working with the fire council on trying to, continue to support all of the different core functions of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and help the community, help work with neighborhoods as they expand on these principles, and we try and integrate even more with Zone Zero. So there definitely still is a fire prevention angle to this. I want to obviously spend more time focused on health and wellness. It's so critical to agencies now. During the last 8 years as fire chief, we've focused on behavioral health of our firefighters. A lot. There's a big push on our cancer awareness and prevention measures. So I'm really proud of being able to integrate those sorts of things into our organization, so that firefighters can enjoy their careers. The work-life balance is something that has really surfaced a lot. This job as fire chief is service above self. It is 24/7, 365. And fire chiefs pour a lot of their souls, of their lives into this to benefit the firefighters. First, I always want to make sure that everybody deserves a round trip home to their families, and they work hard for a living, and it's important for fire chiefs to work hard for them, to support them. And so I feel like we've always been able to do that. But for me, I want to stay engaged. I want to stay healthy. I want to focus more on my own health, because as you go through that role, that you can put yourself last. So I'm going to focus on my own health and well-being, but also be present, continue to volunteer, continue to work. There's a couple of job offers. I'm going to pause, kind of take a tactical pause and look at what the different areas that I can still participate in. But I'm also going to make sure I've got more time for wife and family. Like you mentioned, Bill, earlier, your family, you can't do what you do without them. They've got to support you, and there are a lot of people in law enforcement and fire, end up in divorce. They end up in, they, spend time, probably doing a lot of unhealthy things. And so I think there is brand new awareness around how to build strong, healthy, lives and families. And so I'm going to make sure that, I'm investing fully in my family and being there for my kids and wife as long as I can, right? So that's the 30 out. So
that's right. That's you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Our Bill and Paul's advice to you is absolutely take a breath. You don't have anything to do when you're retired, you have to take a breath and take some time and think about your priorities, and go from there. I really enjoyed working with you as fire chief. I know the tail end of my career, you were there for 2 or 3 years on my last 2 or 3 years, and I really enjoyed working with you, Bill. And I've got to say, again, thanks again for joining us today at Marin Fire History. And do you have anything you'd like to wrap up with? And
I'm just so thankful for everyone, all the mentors and people that have supported and helped me through this process. And Bill, it really starts with you. Those car rides to the trainings when we would talk, and you shared, what it was like, with increasing responsibilities, being a captain, being a chief officer, being a fire chief. And I remember the stories that you told me about, where you start off and you're everyone's friend and you're all involved. And the higher you go and more responsibilities you take on, they're not everybody loves seeing you all the time, because you've got to make those decisions. And instead of going through the kitchen and saying hi to everybody, you find yourself, kind of coming in the back door and getting to work, for them. But sometimes they just don't know how hard you are working for them behind the scenes, for all of the different things, and balancing what the community needs and what the firefighters want. But I'm confident that everything that I've done has also been to support them, the men and women of the fire service who get it done day in and day out. And I'm confident that the bell's still going to go off, and they're going to still get in those big engines and go help people at a very high level. And so I'm just proud of them. I'm proud of the Marin County Fire Service and the California Fire Service, and I'll do what I can to help them thrive and move on. And so I'm looking forward to being a mentor still to folks, all those, Jim Irving, Jeff Davidson, that have been there for me, Jeff Meston. It's just been invaluable to me. So I know we're in a good place to carry on. We've got a great foundation to continue to build on. And I know we're going to thrive as an organization and as a county. I really appreciate and thank you for having me on here. It's really been special. This career is amazing, and I can't wait for the next chapter.
Yep, absolutely. Chief Lellis, do you have anything you'd like to add in closing?
I just one quick question. Who was the chief that took you over to become a sleeper? You recall?
Well, as soon as I came in, he left. And so I got to look that up, Bill. So I'm embarrassed now.
No, we could cut that out.
Keep it now. One good piece of advice. You're going to be retiring, but you can't go to the grocery store in your pajamas. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And you gotta learn in the kitchen, besides the microwave, there's a stove. Okay.
All right.
You're gonna
learn. And a piece of advice for me: when you're enjoying the next 30 years with your wife, and you've been working for the last 30 years at the firehouse, 2 comments I have to make: you're the chief at Novato, but you're not the chief at home. And number 2, stay in your own lane.
All right. All right. I'll take that to heart.
And good luck, Bill. Lots of luck.
Good luck to you, Bill.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care, please.